I waited 4 long years for my wife, but when she returned from her studies abroad, she bluntly demanded a divorce. You're nothing but an old-fashioned merchant, uneducated and with no vision. Why should you waste my youth? I want to pursue equality, freedom, and most of all, love. Disappointed, I agreed to a divorce, never imagining the depths of human wickedness. My in-laws had already laid claim to my fortune as if it were their own. Chapter 1. Late March, Summer City. On the second floor of the Serenity Tea House, Sincere Winthrop pushed the envelope across the table to Mr. Wallace, the editor-in-chief of the Summer City Chronicle. Uncle Wallace, I hope to see this announcement on the front page of your paper in 7 days. Taking the letter, Mr. Wallace glanced at it, a look of suspicion on his face. A divorce announcement? Sincere nodded. Sincere, may I ask why? When the Summer City Chronicle was founded, Sincere's father had been a major investor. Mr. Wallace had known Sincere for a long time. He knew that Sincere had married Victoria Halloway, the daughter of another prominent Summer City family. I remember your wife was the first woman in Summer City to study abroad. Didn't she just return a few days ago? I heard the city government has already offered her a position. It seemed like a perfect union of politics and commerce, a path to great success for you both. Why a divorce now? As he spoke, Mr. Wallace's brow furrowed. Do the Halloways look down on you, or has Victoria become an ingrate? Sincere gave a bitter smile, his dark traditional gown making him seem somewhat somber. If we cannot grow old together, perhaps it's better to part ways sooner. Besides, it's better that I let go first than to be thrown out in the end. Mr. Wallace was furious. He remained silent for a moment before sighing. If that's the case, why wait 7 days to publish the announcement? I can have it in tomorrow's paper. No. Sincere cut him off, lowering his eyes and speaking softly. I have some preparations to make before then. Mr. Wallace stood up. All right then. The divorce announcement will be in the paper in 7 days. Thank you, Uncle Wallace. Sincere also rose and shook his hand. Please keep this confidential for now. You can count on me. After seeing Mr. Wallace off, Sincere left the tea house. A light drizzle had begun to fall from the sky. He settled into a pre-hired rickshaw and said faintly, Prosperity Street, the Halloway residence. Right away, sir, amidst the gentle jostling of the rickshaw, Sincere closed his eyes, letting the fine rain mist his face. At the beginning of the year, his wife Victoria had written from abroad to say she was completing her studies and coming home. Everyone said his long wait was finally over. Sincere himself had thought so too, until, filled with joyous anticipation, he saw Julian Montgomery accompanying Victoria on her return. Julian was Victoria's childhood sweetheart. They had grown up together, attended the New Style schools together. The Halloway and Montgomery families had even once considered a marriage alliance. But through a twist of fate, Victoria had married Sincere instead. Sincere had secretly admired Victoria since they were young. When his wish was granted, he felt his life was complete and blissful. But life is unpredictable. On the Mid-Autumn Festival that year, when families gathered and the city curfew was lifted, bandits broke into the home of the Winthrops, Summer City's wealthiest family. After a violent robbery, they massacred the entire household. Only Sincere, who was not at home at the time, was spared. Though he escaped death, the event left a deep scar on Sincere's heart. He never lived in the Winthrop family mansion again. After the mourning period ended, Sincere and Victoria were married. On their wedding night, Victoria claimed exhaustion and sent Sincere to the study. The very next day, she departed to study abroad. She was gone for 4 years. Sincere never imagined that when Victoria returned, Julian Montgomery would be standing by her side once more. He certainly never imagined that after the reunion dinner that same evening, Victoria would ask him for a divorce. What chilled Sincere to the bone was that his father-in-law and mother-in-law did nothing to stop her. Through his mother-in-law's snide remarks, Sincere learned that the Montgomery family was now more powerful than ever. Julian's father held a high-ranking post in the military government, an orphan from a merchant family, or the son of a high-ranking government official. The choice, it seemed, required little thought. Sincere was both disappointed and heartbroken. Ever since marrying Victoria, he had been a filial son-in-law to her parents and had taken good care of his brother-in-law, Dexter Halloway. The very mansion the Halloways now lived in was one of his family's properties. He had even been willing to help them cover their massive debts, which were hidden behind a facade of prosperity. How had he ended up being despised by everyone? Clinging to a final shred of hope, Sincere went to seek help from his wife's grandmother, Matilda Halloway. "This is utter nonsense in Summer City. I've never heard of a couple getting a divorce. The Winthrops were benefactors to our Halloway family. And it was largely thanks to them that you were able to study abroad. Victoria, you come back and you want to divorce Sincere. Do you want everyone in Summer City to point their fingers at us and call us heartless? Besides, you don't manage the household, so you don't know. Your father got into trouble back then and emptied most of our family's coffers. We've only been able to maintain our current respectable lifestyle thanks to Sincere. If you divorce him, do you expect the whole family to live in poverty? The matter of divorce is not to be mentioned again." Standing outside the old matriarch's rooms, Sincere listened to these heart-piercing words and felt as if he had been plunged into an icy abyss, frozen to the core. Chapter 2. He didn't know, had never imagined, that the seemingly kind and benevolent grandmother who had always treated him like her own grandson could say such things. "But grandmother, Sincere and I have nothing in common. He's such a dull, uncommunicative man. I can't stand him. Julian is different. He's lively, educated, and his father is a high-ranking official in the military government. Grandmother, do you really want me to be a merchant's wife forever?" His body trembling, Sincere heard Victoria's wheedling voice. And then, "Silly child, I only said you shouldn't mention divorce for now, not forever." Why is Sincere so good to our family? Isn't it because he's infatuated with you? Use his feelings to keep him steady for now. As for the future, who can say? Besides, his roots are in Summer City. You and Julian are different. When the time comes, you can ask Julian's father to have you both transferred to the state capital. That wouldn't stop you and Julian from being together, would it? Sincere could only listen, his eyes wide with fury. "Young master, we're almost home." The voice of his attendant, Sam, pulled Sincere back to reality. He opened his eyes and saw the Halloway family gate drawing nearer, a faint smile touching his lips. Sincere stepped out of the rickshaw. The rain hadn't stopped. The two of them shielded their heads with their hands and hurried toward their courtyard. As soon as he entered his residence, the Bamboo Whisper Pavilion, he saw his belongings scattered chaotically all over the yard. They were all Sincere's things. "What are you doing?" Sam cried out in shock, rushing forward to stop two old maids who were carrying a trunk out of the house. "Get out of the way," one of the maids shoved Sam aside and carelessly tossed the trunk into the courtyard. The trunk burst open, and the antique books inside scattered. Sam trembled with rage, shouting, how dare you touch my young master's things?" The maid glanced at Sam with disdain and sneered. "How would we dare to touch the young master-in-law's things on our own?" This was an order from the mistress. Looking at the messy courtyard, Sincere didn't share Sam's anger. "What did my mother-in-law order?" he asked calmly. He was, after all, still the Halloway's son-in-law, and the maids didn't dare treat him with the same contempt they showed Sam. The maid gave a forced laugh. "The mistress said the guest rooms are too remote and damp, being right next to the lotus pond, and aren't suitable for our distinguished guest. She told us to hurry up and clear out this courtyard for Mr. Montgomery to move into." After speaking, she paid no more attention to Sincere's expression and went back to clearing out his things. "This is too much." Sam's eyes reddened, his chest heaving. How could she do this? Indeed, how could his mother-in-law do this? Strictly speaking, this entire mansion belonged to the Winthrop family. The Bamboo Whisper Pavilion was the courtyard he had been given when he married. How dare she make him move out and give it to an outsider? Their intentions were so obvious they weren't even trying to hide them. Sam clearly thought of this too and stamped his foot. "I'm going to find old Mrs. Halloway and have her sort this out." Sincere grabbed Sam, stopping him from running to the matriarch. His gaze was cold as he looked at the servants who were still carrying his things out. He took a deep breath. "You stay here and watch. I'll go see my mother-in-law." Sincere considered himself even-tempered, but he wasn't about to swallow such a blatant insult. Fire burning in his chest, he didn't even bother with an umbrella, striding quickly through the rain to the residence of his in-laws. He had just entered their courtyard when he heard a burst of cheerful laughter. Pressing his lips together, Sincere walked in to see his mother-in-law, Eleanor, smiling at his brother-in-law, Dexter. When Sincere entered, neither of them paid him any attention. Dexter was pacing around the room. "Mother, do I look good in this?" Eleanor nodded in satisfaction. "Yes, very different from usual." Today Dexter was wearing a plaid suit and a pair of pointed leather shoes. His hair was slicked back with an obscene amount of pomade. He looked quite dapper, with his fair skin and red lips. Dexter then held out his wrist, showing off a watch. "My dear Julian said these wristwatches are all the rage in the West now, so convenient and stylish." At this he shot a contemptuous glance at Sincere. "It just goes to show that people who've studied abroad are different. My dear Julian isn't like some people, who only give books or ink as gifts, so terribly tacky." He finished by drawing out his words in a snide, sing-song tone, truly classless. Sincere frowned. All his family was gone. Since his marriage, he had treated his brother-in-law, Dexter, like his own younger brother. He had thought Dexter might have some genuine affection for him. Now it seemed he had been too naive. When Dexter needed money, he was brother-in-law. Now that the fashionable and dashing Julian Montgomery had appeared, Sincere had become tacky and classless. All his kindness had been completely wasted. Eleanor didn't stop her son's rude and mocking behavior. She spoke with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Sincere, you're here about moving, aren't you? It was my idea. Julian is an honored guest, and he's Victoria's classmate. They'll be working together in the future. It's better for them to live closer to look after each other. You wouldn't disagree, would you, Sincere?" Sincere clenched his fists tightly. After a long moment, he finally spoke. "I wonder what Grandmother and Victoria think of this." Chapter 3. "What's going on?" Victoria walked in, a bright smile on her face. With her was Julian Montgomery, one hand casually in his pocket. Seeing Sincere there, Victoria's smile froze for a second before she composed herself. Julian, on the other hand, showed no awkwardness at all. He raised an eyebrow and, as if staking his claim, put his arm around Victoria's shoulders. Dexter scurried over to tattle. "Sister, you're just in time. Mother told brother-in-law to clear out the bamboo whisper pavilion for my dear Julian." Brother-in-law wasn't happy and is questioning mother about it. He shot a triumphant look at Sincere. Victoria, however, was stunned for a moment and looked questioningly at her mother. Eleanor gave a slight cough about to explain when Julian spoke up first. "Oh, Aunt Eleanor, you're too thoughtful." He let go of Victoria and walked over to stand beside Eleanor. "You knew I've never been able to stand being alone and love a lively atmosphere. But," he looked at Sincere, a provocative smile subtly playing on his lips, "if Mr. Winthrop is unwilling, we should just forget it. After all, it wouldn't be right for you to be blamed on account of me, an outsider." As he spoke, he shook his head with a generous smile. "Dear boy, I've never thought of you as an outsider." Eleanor was extremely affectionate, patting Julian's hand. The Bamboo Whisper Pavilion is spacious and close to Victoria's study. "I'd be happier than anything to see you two grow closer." "Mother has a point," Victoria said, recovering from her shock and smiling as well. "Julian, you've been away from Summer City for many years. A lot has changed. It's better if we're closer so I can look after you." She then shot Sincere a look of disgust, her voice turning cold. "Sincere, didn't you always say you'd put me first in everything? If Julian and I are on good terms, his father will look upon me more favorably in the future. Surely you're not unaware of that?" Don't be such a petty man." That one sentence laid bare all of Victoria's dislike and contempt for him. Rage surged through Sincere. He wanted nothing more than to slap Victoria across the face, but his upbringing wouldn't allow him to strike a woman. He didn't miss the flash of triumph in Julian's eyes. Lowering his gaze, he forced himself to swallow the metallic taste of blood from his bitten lip. When he looked up again, his expression was calm. It wasn't yet time for an open confrontation with Victoria. He asked calmly, "Petty? Victoria, is that how you see me?" "I came back from outside to find my things thrown into the courtyard. Many of my rare and antique books are soaked in rainwater. When I asked, 2 maids said it was my mother-in-law's order. I came here to ask her directly, afraid the servants were slandering her. What's wrong with that?" He paused, then looked at Eleanor. "Mother-in-law, please tell me truthfully, have I said a single harsh word since I arrived?" Eleanor's face stiffened, her mouth opening and closing. It was true. From the moment he'd arrived until Victoria came in, it was her own son who had been making snide remarks, while Sincere hadn't said a word. "What are you trying to say?" Dexter couldn't stand it. He jumped up, pointing at Sincere and shouting, "Are you saying Mother and I framed you?" "That's not what I meant." Sincere turned to Victoria. His hands were clasped in front of him. Though his long gown was soaked with rain, he still possessed an elegance as graceful as pine and bamboo. "Victoria, do you believe me?" Under his clear gaze, Victoria frowned. She felt that her mother, her brother, and Sincere were all making too big a deal out of this. It was just giving her a headache. "Stop trying to argue your way out of it." Dexter refused to miss this chance to curry favor with Julian, his fingertip almost touching Sincere's nose. "You came running over here to question Mother, didn't you? Even if you didn't say it, you thought it, and that's unfilial." Sincere was so angry he almost laughed. "That's the first time I've ever heard such logic." "That's enough." Victoria cut Sincere off impatiently. "Dexter is just a boy. Why are you arguing with him? So he said a few words to you. It's not like it hurt you. Why make such a fuss? It's so tiresome, it's just one room. What's the big deal about letting Julian have it? There are so many courtyards in this house, it's not like you'll be left without a place to stay. And you have to make a scene about it. Upsetting Mother for no reason. Victoria, what are you doing?" Julian walked over and patted her shoulder. "It's very unladylike for a woman to speak in such a frantic and angry manner." He then turned to Sincere with a feigned look of guilt. "I'm so sorry. I didn't realize that changing rooms would make you this angry. How about this? I won't move into the Bamboo Whisper Pavilion, and you stop being angry with your mother-in-law and Victoria, all right?" This speech was met with satisfaction from the Halloways. Eleanor, in particular, nodded in approval, as expected of someone who has studied abroad. So much class. Watching their hypocritical performance, Sincere's stomach suddenly churned. Unable to bear it any longer, he turned and walked away. Julian watched Sincere's retreating back, his eyes glinting. "I hope Mr. Winthrop isn't angry. I'll go have a word with him." Chapter 4. Sincere was soaked to the bone by the rain, but he seemed completely unaware. His heart, however, was ice cold. The chilly rain on his face made his eyes sting. Though he had known Victoria's heart had changed the night she returned, and though he had already decided to divorce her and let her be with Julian, being slandered by the Halloways and berated by Victoria in front of Julian still felt like a knife twisting in his heart. So sincerity could not be exchanged for sincerity. So from the very beginning he had always been alone. A few years ago, his father-in-law, Reginald, had invested a huge sum of money in a business venture in the South Seas and lost everything, nearly bankrupting the Halloway family. Julian had immediately cut ties with Victoria, and his family had left Summer City. What had Victoria said back then? She had thrown herself into Sincere's arms as he comforted her, saying that if she had the choice, she would never love a cold and selfish man like Julian. Who would have thought that in just a few short years Victoria's heart and eyes would once again be filled with Julian, while he, Sincere Winthrop, had become the petty one. Sincere stood by the pond, his long gown clinging to his body. In the miserable wind and rain, he looked even more gaunt. Taking a breath, a bitter smile touched his lips. In 7 days, the announcement of his divorce from Victoria would be in the papers. What was there left to hope for? The most important thing for him now was to clearly separate his Winthrop family assets from the Halloways. "Are you angry?" A voice with a hint of a smile came from behind him. Sincere spun around to see Julian approaching slowly, holding a black umbrella. Julian looked Sincere up and down, the mockery in his eyes undisguised, the much-praised young master of the Winthrop family. "How did you end up in such a sorry state? Look at you, all muddy and dirty," Julian sneered. "No wonder Victoria doesn't like you." Sincere quietly watched the man who was taunting him. Julian wasn't wearing the traditional long gown common in Summer City. Instead, he wore a crisp white shirt under a navy blue vest, with perfectly pressed trousers and a pair of shiny leather shoes. His hair was meticulously styled. He looked fashionable and dapper. In comparison, Sincere was indeed a mess. His clothes and hair were soaked, plastered to his body. "Don't be too sad. Try to look on the bright side." Julian walked up to Sincere and patted his cheek with a domineering smile. "Victoria never loved you anyway. It was only because I left that she settled for you as a second choice." "Why?" Sincere suddenly spoke, making Julian freeze. "What?" Sincere looked him in the eye and asked calmly, "You knew Victoria was married. Why are you still with her? An arranged marriage forced by parents. Do you even call that a marriage? Victoria told me everything. You took advantage of her when she was at her most vulnerable and made her develop feelings for you. It was you who used your family's wealth to pressure her into marrying you when the Halloways were on the verge of collapse." Julian tapped his own head, his voice full of disdain. "Your mind is utterly antiquated. You're a young man, yet you refuse to see the world outside. I bet a man like you is still obsessed with the old ways of a wife's absolute obedience. It's truly tragic that our society is filled with rigid, old-fashioned people like you. You're not worthy of Victoria in the slightest. If you had any self-awareness, you would have divorced her long ago, and then what?" "I divorce Victoria and hand her over to you," Julian said proudly. "Victoria and I studied abroad together. We're in love. She loves me now, and I love her. No matter what you think, you have to admit that Victoria and I are a match made in heaven. It doesn't matter if you refuse to divorce her. At worst." Just then, the sound of footsteps and conversation drifted from nearby. Julian's eyes darted around, a wicked glint in his gaze as he looked at Sincere. "At worst, I'll have Victoria file for divorce with that." To Sincere's astonishment, Julian let out a loud cry and threw himself backward into the pond. Without a moment's hesitation, Sincere instinctively reached out and grabbed Julian's wrist. Julian smiled at him and whispered, "Who do you think Victoria will believe?" With 2 splashes, both men fell into the water. As he struggled, Sincere saw Victoria rush over like a house on fire and jump into the water after them. Chapter 5. The water in the pond was over a man's head deep and chillingly cold. Sincere couldn't swim. He had nearly drowned as a child. Victoria, who had rushed over, didn't even spare him a glance, let alone try to help. After several failed struggles, Sincere gradually lost consciousness in a wave of grief and anger. When he opened his eyes again, he found himself lying in an unfamiliar bed. His head was splitting, and his lips were dry and sore. "Young master, you're finally awake," Sam came in with a glass of water. Seeing Sincere's open eyes, he hurried to the bedside and felt his forehead. The fever's finally broken. Sam's eyes were red and swollen, clear evidence that he had been crying for a long time. Sincere raised a hand and wiped a tear from the corner of Sam's eye. "Where are we?" Sam, who had been worried sick all night, covered his face and started crying again. "Young master, they've gone too far. Not only did they cause you to pass out, they moved us to the Pear Blossom Courtyard." The Pear Blossom Courtyard was the most remote courtyard in the entire estate, right next to the servants' quarters. Just as Sincere was about to comfort Sam, the door was thrown open with a loud bang. He looked toward the sound and saw Victoria and Julian walking in together. Seeing Sincere awake, Julian immediately turned to Victoria with a joyful expression. "See, Victoria? I told you he'd be fine." An unreadable light glinted in Julian's eyes as he stepped forward and grabbed Sincere's hand. "Mr. Winthrop, it's so good to see you're all right. You were unconscious all night." Victoria was worried sick. "Julian, you're just too kind." Victoria scoffed, striding to the bedside. She looked down at Sincere, her eyes filled with contempt. "Since you're fine, get up and apologize to Julian." Sincere looked at her quietly. He couldn't understand how he could have once liked this person so much, only to now feel such revulsion. Averting his gaze, he said faintly, "I did nothing wrong. Why should I apologize?" Victoria's face flushed with anger, and she shouted, "I saw it all. Julian was talking to you nicely, and you pushed him into the water. Don't you know how dangerous that was? Apologize to Julian. You saw it?" A sarcastic smile touched Sincere's lips. "Did you really see it?" If she had, she would have seen that Julian had thrown himself into the pond. Victoria was at a loss for words, pressing her lips together. She had only started running toward the pond after hearing Julian's cry. By the time she arrived, both men were already in the water. "But even if I didn't see it, it's obvious you were jealous that I loved Julian and tried to harm him." The words were nauseating. Sincere's stomach genuinely churned. He struggled to sit up and leaned over the side of the bed, dry heaving. Julian yelped and jumped back into a corner. Seeing that Sincere hadn't actually vomited, Julian quickly went to Victoria's side and took her hand. "Victoria, let's just let it go. I don't even mind, so why are you holding on to it?" "No," Victoria refused flatly. Her beautiful face was contorted with anger. "It's because you don't mind that he's becoming more and more audacious." "Sincere Winthrop, you're a literate man. Do you really think you can deceive me with such a story? Julian is not like you. He received a modern education from a young age, pursuing freedom, equality, and independence. A man like him has a grand vision for the world with his background, education, ambition, and perspective. Why would he ever resort to using his own body to frame you? You caused Julian to fall into the water, and he had a high fever all night. Even so, the first thing he asked when he woke up this morning was how you were. Sincere Winthrop, you must have the courage to admit your own mistakes if you're a man. Get up and apologize to Julian." After her tirade, Victoria looked at Sincere's handsome face and her heart suddenly softened a little. She softened her voice. "I know you did all this because you love me, and I won't look down on you for it. As long as you apologize, in my heart, you'll still be the kind and reasonable man you once were. Perhaps we can even continue to be husband and wife." "Victoria!" Julian exclaimed, his handsome eyes filled with shock. "What are you saying?" What did she mean they could happily continue as husband and wife? Chapter 6. Seeing the sudden dark look on Julian's face, Victoria felt a pang of guilt. She pulled his hand reassuringly. "Julian, I'll explain everything to you later." Julian angrily shook her off and stormed out. Now Victoria couldn't care less about any apologies. She rushed after him. After a few steps, she turned back, glaring at Sincere through gritted teeth. "You'd better pray that Julian isn't truly angry, otherwise, with his father's position, you won't be able to bear the consequences." After delivering her threat, Victoria hurried away. "Young master," Sam called out worriedly. "It looks like the young mistress won't let this go." "On the contrary, she won't be back for a while," Sincere said calmly, looking at the open door. Julian stormed back to the Bamboo Whisper Pavilion, grabbed his suitcase, and started to leave. "Julian, let me explain." Victoria desperately hugged him from behind, standing on her tiptoes. She whispered something in his ear, and Julian gradually calmed down. He looked at her suspiciously. "Are you telling the truth?" "Of course it's true. I've only ever loved you." Since we were children. Throwing herself into Julian's arms, Victoria promised, "Don't worry. One day I will divorce Sincere Winthrop." Julian seized the opportunity to suggest that the Holloway family host a modern-style party. "Victoria, The young people in Summer City still follow the old ways of arranged marriages. We can be the pioneers in the fight against this feudal system. Don't you think this is an opportunity to challenge the old ideas of the entire city? Victoria agreed. For the next 3 days, she didn't set foot in the Pear Blossom courtyard. In fact, no one from the Holloway family did. It was as if everyone had forgotten that Sincere and Sam were living there. Sam was indignant, but Sincere didn't care at all, because he had finally received a reply. The night Victoria returned and asked for a divorce, Sincere had sat up all night. From his in-law's attitude, he had a feeling his marriage was doomed. Sooner or later, the Holloways would kick him out. "If you show me no love, then I shall leave." On the 3rd day after Victoria's return, he had made up his mind and sent an express letter. Having received the answer he wanted, Sincere began to carefully organize his plans for the factory he intended to open. A soap factory. Currently, there were no real soap factories in the country. If he could build the first one, the profits would be immeasurable. Mr. Winthrop. A young maid appeared.
"The old mistress has requested your presence."
Sincere's pen paused. He put away his formula notes and followed the maid to Matilda Holloway's small private chapel. Grandmother. Watching Matilda Holloway chanting scriptures and tapping a wooden fish amidst the swirling incense smoke, Sincere found the scene somewhat absurd. A kind face hiding a serpent's heart.
This was it, wasn't it? Sincere.
Finally finished with her prayers, Matilda gestured for Sincere to help her to a seat. "I've already heard about Victoria's behavior." Sincere put on a perfectly sad expression and lowered his head. "Don't be too upset. You know what Victoria is like. Her heart. It's too big, but Grandmother can see that she still has you in it, my dear boy. As long as you treat her well, she'll eventually see her own feelings clearly." "You're right, Grandmother." Matilda was very pleased with Sincere's compliant attitude. She smiled, her face a web of wrinkles. "Sincere, I know your heart is full of Victoria." Hearing this, Sincere keenly sensed that the old woman was about to ask him to do something. Sure enough, he heard Matilda say, "Victoria is planning to host a party at home for the young people of Summer City. That fellow Montgomery was eager to take charge, but I refused him. You are the man of this house. This matter must be handled by you." Sincere understood. Julian was trying to use this opportunity to get his foot in the Holloway door. Sincere didn't know what his in-laws thought, but it was clear that Matilda disagreed. She was using him to warn Julian that the Holloways weren't fools, and at the same time pitting the two men against each other. Her schemes were so blatant they were practically slapping him in the face. "When is this party to be held?" "In 3 days." Sincere smiled. What a coincidence. In 3 days, the announcement of his divorce would be in the papers. Chapter 7. Sincere took over the party preparations, and Julian was furious. Victoria had to console him. So what if Sincere is organizing the party? He may have some status in Summer City, but at the end of the day, he's just a merchant. What does he have besides the reek of money? Let him worry about it. When the time comes, we'll attend and host together. Won't you be the one in the spotlight? Julian thought about it and agreed. You're right, but since your grandmother says he's so thorough, let's invite more people to this party. Let's see if the famous head of the Winthrop family really has such a wide network. He handed over a new guest list. On it were government officials, business magnates, and all the notable figures in Summer City. Isn't this a bit too grand? Victoria hesitated. Julian didn't care. The grander, the better. When Sincere received the new guest list, he just smiled. Since Victoria and Julian were so eager for the limelight, how could he not give them the opportunity? While having new invitations written and sent out, Sincere gave Sam a series of instructions. On the invitation, Sincere signed the names of Victoria Holloway and Julian Montgomery. Their family backgrounds and future positions in the city government had already been thoroughly investigated by the city's elite. Besides, Victoria and Julian had been inseparable since their return, and rumors were already spreading that Victoria intended to remarry. So, everyone came to the Holloway party expecting a good show. The party was held in a courtyard specifically designed for watching opera performances. Victoria had dressed with great care and stood at the entrance with Julian to greet the guests. Today she wasn't wearing her usual trousers and shirt, but had opted for a full-skirted dress. The white dress, elbow-length gloves, and an exquisite lace-trimmed hat on her curled hair made her look very elegant. Beside her stood Julian in a suit and gold-rimmed glasses. Sincere stood in a corner, watching the two of them mingling with the guests, thinking they did indeed make a perfect couple. A burst of loud laughter came from behind him, followed by chatter. Sincere looked over and saw a group of teenagers gathered around Dexter. "Dexter, your sister has come back from abroad even more beautiful than before." "Yes, in my opinion, there's no one in all of Summer City as fashionable as Miss Halloway." Two young men gazed at Victoria with infatuation, praising her with flushed faces. Dexter held his chin high, looking smug. "Of course. My sister is the first woman from Summer City to study abroad, and she's going to work in the city government. Miss Halloway is dressed beautifully, but isn't it a bit too plain for an occasion like this? It seems rather unlucky." Dexter looked at the girl who had spoken as if she were an idiot. "What do you know? My sister is wearing the latest in ladylike fashion. All the young ladies in the West dress like this. It's stylish and sophisticated." His gaze swept the room and suddenly landed on Sincere in the corner. Seeing Sincere still dressed in an old-fashioned silver long gown, he raised his voice. "My dear Julian says suits are the modern trend. I say we should all start learning. Look at my brother-in-law, always in a long gown, so stuffy and old-fashioned. He doesn't have an ounce of youthful spirit." Following his gaze, the teenagers all saw Sincere. Feeling somewhat awkward, they quickly dispersed. Seeing his friends scatter like mice from a cat at the sight of Sincere, Dexter grew angry. He strode up to Sincere and demanded, "Why are you here?" Sincere ignored his rudeness. He looked toward the main gate where Sam was now standing, holding up a newspaper. A flame seemed to ignite in Sincere's eyes. He took the paper from Sam, glanced at it quickly, and let out a soft laugh. "What are you laughing at?" Dexter frowned. "Hey, I'm talking to you." Sincere acted as if he hadn't heard, his eyes fixed on Victoria and Julian as they moved among Summer City's elite. "You're jealous, aren't you?" Dexter blocked Sincere's path. Seeing no one was around, he lowered his voice with malicious glee. "It's no use being jealous. Only a man like my dear Julian is worthy of standing by my sister's side." Sincere smiled faintly, crossed the hall, and walked steadily onto the pre-built stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sincere's voice rang out. All eyes turned to him. Julian whispered to Victoria, "What is he doing up there?" Victoria was also stunned. Seeing the smile on Sincere's lips, she had an instinctive feeling that something was wrong. Sure enough, the next moment she heard Sincere's voice, clear and distinct. "Your presence here today honors the Halloway home. I, Sincere, thank you all for your care and support over the years. On that note, I have a small announcement to make, and that is," he held up the newspaper. "As of today, Victoria Halloway and I are dissolving our marriage." Chapter 8. No one in the hall had expected Sincere to announce his divorce so publicly at such an event. For a moment it was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. "Sincere Winthrop, what did you say?" Julian was the first to react, shouting, "On what grounds are you divorcing her?" Sincere looked gravely at the gritting, furious Julian, his expression calm. But his voice was not soft, and his words were clear enough for everyone in the hall to hear. "Mr. Montgomery, you and Victoria share the bond of childhood sweethearts and the experience of studying abroad together. Compared to you, I admit I lack any commendable knowledge or experience. While I do not wish to disparage myself, I must admit that Victoria is right. You are the one who is most suited for her. Therefore, I am willingly divorcing her to grant you both your happiness." As he spoke, Sincere's eyes reddened slightly, but a smile played on his lips. It was a smile of both relief and, it seemed, happiness. He gave a slight bow to the crowd in the hall. "Everyone, this is a new era of reconstruction. Our generation should not only have the courage and right to pursue equality and freedom, but also possess broad knowledge. I am a man of humble talents, but after this divorce, I will devote more of my energy to building schools, hospitals, and the like. I wish to do my small part for the well-being of our people." In his silver long gown, with his handsome features and gentle demeanor, Sincere stood on the stage, practically glowing. Whispers erupted throughout the hall. So, it was Miss Halloway who asked for the divorce. The person who said this drew out their words, their expression full of meaning. A companion whispered back, "I've heard for a while that Miss Halloway was quite dissatisfied with young Master Winthrop after she returned from abroad, feeling he wasn't educated in the West and wasn't worthy of her. That's a load of nonsense if you ask me. The Halloway and Winthrop families have been friends for generations. Even if young Master Winthrop didn't study abroad, he was tutored by private scholars. Besides, he's not that old, yet he's managing the affairs of two families. Is that something a person who's studied abroad can necessarily do?" It all boils down to two things. Do tell casting off the old for the new, and climbing the social ladder. Hearing these heart-piercing words, Eleanor Halloway's eyes rolled back in her head, and she fainted. Chaos ensued. Reginald Halloway had his wife carried away, then sighed and walked onto the stage. He stood before Sincere, his face a mixture of guilt and reprimand. "Sincere, my boy, how could you say the word divorce so lightly? This marriage was arranged by the elders of both our families. Even if you and Victoria were to reach the point of divorce, shouldn't you have consulted us elders first? Though you are my son-in-law, I have also watched you grow up. In my heart, you are no different from Victoria and Dexter. You are all my children." Reginald, the old fox, had masterfully turned the situation around in just a few sentences. He had made it seem as though the divorce was Sincere's unilateral decision, while positioning the Halloways as loving elders who honored their commitments. The direction of the murmurs below instantly changed. That's right. Miss Halloway may have acted rashly, but how can one say the word divorce so easily? How must the elders feel? Sincere didn't interrupt, waiting for what his father-in-law would say next. "In any case, we will not agree to you and Victoria divorcing. Sincere, don't act on impulse. The main line of the Winthrop family is gone, and your other relatives are not in this state. I will not have people saying that the Halloway family bullied you because you had no one to stand up for you." Sincere's smile didn't waver. He bowed slightly. "Father-in-law, you are mistaken. When Victoria and I were husband and wife, you cherished me. If we are not, does that mean you would abandon me if I fell on hard times? I imagine you are not so heartless." His words were soft, but held a hidden sting, throwing the problem right back at Reginald. With his back to the guests, Reginald's face darkened. "Sincere, do not be willful," he gestured to the servants behind him and said loudly, "The young master-in-law has been overworked lately and is exhausted. Take him back to rest." The servants acknowledged and moved forward. Sincere took a wary step back, his gaze turning icy. "Father-in-law, what are you trying to do?" Reginald had lost his patience. He waved his hand and said, enunciating each word, "Escort the young master-in-law back." "Father." Victoria, who had been in a daze, finally snapped out of it. She called out, stammering, "Perhaps we should just do as Sincere says." "You be quiet," Reginald shot her a fierce glare. The Winthrop fortune was worth millions. If they didn't divorce, the Halloways could legally continue to bleed the Winthrop family dry through their marriage ties. If Victoria hadn't been so impatient and brought up divorce the moment she returned, he would have had countless ways to make Sincere disappear quietly. He wouldn't have been pushed into such an embarrassing corner after silencing Victoria. Reginald waved his hand. The servants pushed aside Sam, who was standing in front of Sincere, and were about to grab him. Clap, clap, clap. A round of applause came from the entrance. A Halloway party is certainly interesting. She's here, Chapter 9. At the entrance to the hall stood a troop of young soldiers. In their midst was a girl of about 17 or 18, She too was in military uniform, a hand's-width utility belt cinched around her slender waist, and riding boots on her feet. Her face was as radiant as a blooming rose, breathtakingly beautiful, but the glint in her eyes held a nonchalant, almost roguish air rarely seen in a woman. She clapped as she walked slowly into the hall. I've long heard that the young master of the Winthrop family is a man of outstanding character, his abilities a cut above his peers. Seeing you today, I can say the rumors don't do you justice. And you are, miss? Reginald frowned. The Halloways had dealings with some military figures, but he had never seen this young woman before. My dear Roxana? Julian ran over in delight. Are you here to see me? The girl's eyes filled with confusion. Who are you? Julian's face flushed crimson. He forced a smile. My dear Roxana, it's me, Julian Montgomery, fearing she wouldn't remember, he added. My father is the Secretary General of the military government. We met at the government headquarters. Ah, Marcus Montgomery's son, the young woman said. Oh, and just as a smile appeared on Julian's handsome face, she added, Don't remember you. A girl in the crowd couldn't help but let out a snort of laughter. A flash of anger crossed Julian's face. He frowned and asked, Didn't my father send you to find me? Marcus Montgomery doesn't have that much pull, the young woman scoffed, then explained patiently, I'm here for Sincere Winthrop. She squinted, her gaze falling on Sincere, who was still on the stage. Miss Shaw Reginald had already guessed the young woman's identity. She was Roxana Shaw, the daughter of Marshall Shaw. And such a personage was here for Sincere Winthrop? Reginald's heart pounded with unease, but he had to force a fawning smile, his attitude extremely respectful. I didn't realize young Marshall Shaw would grace us with her presence. Forgive my failure to welcome you properly. Please, miss, come in and have a seat. As he spoke, he shot a look at his daughter. Victoria was in the middle of comforting a humiliated Julian. Seeing her father's signal, she had no choice but to step forward. Miss Shaw, hello. I am Victoria Halloway. I've just returned from studying abroad and will soon be taking up a position in the city government. She had always looked down on these warlords, considering them no better than bandits and thugs. Thus, her attitude was quite haughty. Roxana Shaw sized her up but didn't respond, instead saying to Reginald, Mr. Halloway, no need for formalities. This young marshal is here today on official orders. Her meaningful gaze fell upon Sincere. Mr. Winthrop, this young marshal is here for you. Sincere? Reginald's brow furrowed. He had a feeling Roxana's visit was not a friendly one. Had Sincere somehow offended her? He immediately shouted, Did you do something foolish? Hurry up and apologize to Miss Shaw then. With a placating smile to Roxana, he said, Young Marshal Shaw, Sincere is young and may have acted improperly. If he has offended the marshal in his ignorance, please feel free to discipline him as you see fit. Reginald had made his position clear. Whatever Sincere had done, young Marshal Shaw could deal with him however she wished. In fact, Reginald thought to himself, it might not be a bad thing if this resolved the Sincere problem once and for all. Seeing the calculation on his face, Roxana couldn't help but laugh again. The laugh lit up the room. It was dangerous, yet captivating. Not a single young man or woman present was not captivated by her smile, especially Dexter Halloway. His mouth was half open, completely dumbstruck. Mr. Sincere Winthrop, please come here, Roxana said in a loud voice. Sincere walked gracefully up to Roxana. He bowed slightly. Miss Shaw, a pleasure to meet you. You're an interesting person. Roxana didn't say much more. With a flick of her right hand, two adjutants behind her turned and strode away. A short while later they returned, carrying a large plaque. Everyone in the hall strained to see. On the plaque were two large, flourishing characters. Righteous Merchant. Mr. Winthrop, knowing the importance of peace and stability for the local populace, has donated half of the Winthrop family fortune to supply our army, ensuring the security of the lands under our jurisdiction. He is truly a hero among men. The marshal has said that such great vision and such generosity make him a true righteous merchant. Sincere bowed again. The marshal is too kind. It is merely the duty of us merchants. Without local peace, the people cannot live and work in contentment, and how then can merchants prosper? I have only done what is natural. As he bowed, Roxana quickly reached out a hand to stop him. Mr. Winthrop, you need not be so modest. My heavens, half the Winthrop fortune. The murmurs started up again. What a gesture, such magnanimity. Most people could never do that. The Winthrop family had been merchants for generations, and their wealth was among the greatest in Summer City. They owned numerous businesses with immense annual profits. Otherwise, the Halloways would never have let their daughter marry Sincere after his parents and brother had passed away. To donate half of his fortune just like that, Sincere's grand gesture stunned everyone. Most stunned of all were the Halloways, especially Reginald. For a moment he was completely lost for words. Sincere Winthrop. When he looked at Sincere again, Reginald wanted nothing more than to swallow him whole. Chapter 10. Meeting Reginald's ravenous gaze, Sincere curved his lips into a smile. When he had overheard Matilda persuading Victoria not to divorce, he knew that if he didn't break away from the Halloways, the family might very well kill him for his wealth. So, after careful consideration, he had written a letter directly to Roxana Shaw. Sincere had proposed to use half of the Winthrop fortune as a token of his commitment to cooperate with her. Roxana had replied quickly, stating that she would come to Summer City in person today to discuss the partnership. She had arrived right on time, and, in doing so, had broken the stalemate he was in. Since the Halloway and Winthrop families were joined by marriage, and with the trust of our elders, I have been managing the finances of both families. Here are the account books for all the Halloway businesses for the past few years. Sincere gestured for Sam to bring over the ledgers. As it happens, all the esteemed elders and peers of Summer City are present today. Let us ask them to be our witnesses. Victoria and I are divorcing, and the assets will be clearly divided now to avoid any disputes in the future. Reginald gritted his teeth. You planned this all along? He cursed inwardly. He had always seen Sincere as soft-spoken, and knew he was deeply in love with Victoria, so he had never paid him much mind. He never expected him to be so cunning. To have contacted Roxana Shaw and secretly audited the accounts in just over a week, as Sincere had said, almost every person of note in Summer City was here. He was blackmailing the Halloways. Good, very good. Sincere, all our sincerity was truly wasted on you. Dexter chimed in sarcastically. Just a few days ago, you were jealous of my sister and pushed my dear Julian into the water. Now you're with Miss Shaw. What a philanderer, I despise you. The words had barely left his mouth when a blur of motion was followed by a sharp slap across his face. A trickle of blood appeared at the corner of Dexter's mouth. You hit me? As Dexter opened his mouth, a white tooth fell out. The stinging pain on his face and the sweet taste of blood in his mouth turned his shock into fury. Roxana pulled off her leather gloves and threw them to the ground, her eyes downcast as she said coldly, disgusting. How could you strike a child? Seeing her brother hit, Victoria was enraged. Miss Shaw, you are a prominent figure in the Marshal's army. Where are your manners? To hell with manners. Roxana sneered. I stand on my own 2 feet by killing our enemies. I'm not some stuffy intellectual. Can manners win battles? She raised her eyelids. Her eyes, though shaped like peach blossoms and full of charm, held a frosty glint. Who do you think I am? I am the young marshal of the Shaw army. Is that someone a brat like him can slander? As she spoke, the hands of her 2 adjutants simultaneously went to the pistols at their waists. Reginald quickly intervened. Dexter is still young. If his words have offended the young marshal, I beg you to be magnanimous. Roxana waved her hand dismissively. This young marshal doesn't have time for your nonsense. Mr. Winthrop, she lifted her chin toward Sincere. I've brought men with me. This half of the Winthrop fortune, shall we inventory it here or elsewhere? If the young marshal can spare the time, A discussion at the old Winthrop residence would be best. Sincere took the ledgers from Sam and personally presented them to Reginald. Father-in-law, please examine these accounts. If there are any discrepancies, I can explain them in front of all our guests. Reginald knew very well that if Sincere could present these ledgers so openly, there would be no mistakes to be found. But to let Sincere go, to lose the Winthrop family's mountain of gold, felt like being roasted over a fire. The pain was excruciating. "Mr. Halloway, why aren't you taking them?" Roxana suddenly leaned in. Could it be that the Halloway family also wishes to donate its assets, just like Mr. Winthrop? No, Reginald immediately snatched the ledgers from Sincere's hands. His face was a mask of misery as he forced down the metallic taste rising in his throat. "Miss Shaw is joking. The Halloway family is a humble one. How could we compare to the Winthrops?" That's what this young marshal thought too. "Oh, by the way, is this mansion also a Winthrop property?" Roxana glanced around the hall with a slight smile. "Since Mr. Winthrop has divorced your daughter, there's no reason for your family to continue living here, is there?" Reginald looked at Sincere for help. But before Sincere could speak, Roxana's face had already hardened. She raised an imperious eyebrow. "No need to look at Mr. Winthrop. After all, he donated half of the Winthrop family's assets. So this mansion is naturally part of that. This young marshal will give you 5 days. Move out within 5 days. Otherwise—" She didn't finish the sentence. Cold sweat was already beading on Reginald's forehead. Victoria's face was a mask of fury, but her eyes darted to the pistol at Roxana's waist, and she dared not say a word. "Mr. Winthrop, please lead the way. Young Marshal, may I borrow your men for a moment?" Sincere's eyes shone like stars. "I am preparing to move back into my old home. There are some things here that I use daily. I would be grateful if your men could help me move them." Roxana squinted at him for a moment, then whispered a single word. "Fine." Sincere nodded in thanks once more. Then Roxana's adjutant personally led a team of men inside. The guests watched as large pieces of furniture, various antiques and paintings, and dozens of trunks were carried out of the Halloway residence. Reginald's heart ached so much he couldn't bear it. Finally, he could hold it in no longer. He pointed a trembling finger at Sincere, his eyes rolled back, and he too fainted. Chapter 11. Amidst the cries of the Halloway siblings, Roxana Shaw, with a gentlemanly flair, extended a hand in a gesture of invitation. Sincere bowed slightly and walked ahead without ceremony. Roxana paused, a playful look in her eyes as she watched his retreating back, then followed closely behind. Watching Sincere being escorted away by Roxana and her men, Julian's eyes filled with venomous resentment. How dare Sincere Winthrop, how dare a lowly merchant who had never attended a proper school, let alone studied abroad, steal his spotlight? And Roxana Shaw, his father, was a man of influence in the military government. How could she just ignore him? Julian was so angry he felt his chest would explode. Father, what's wrong?" Victoria's panicked cries came from behind him. Julian turned to see a trickle of red seeping from the corner of Reginald's mouth. An idea sparked in his mind, and he immediately shouted, "Victoria, Mr. Halloway was so angered by Sincere he's coughing up blood." Julian stamped his foot in feigned distress. How could he do this? Your parents always treated him like their own son, entrusted him with so much responsibility, even the Halloway family business. Even if he's now favored by Miss Shaw and wants a divorce, he shouldn't be so ruthless and ungrateful. His words twisted the truth completely. Julian was pleased to see the guests begin to murmur amongst themselves again. Dexter, speaking through a swollen mouth, also began to denounce Sincere. Sincere Winthrop is nothing but an ingrate. While calling for a doctor, Victoria directed a few servants to carry her father inside. Then, wiping her tears, she addressed the guests. "I apologize for the spectacle. I never imagined something like this would happen today. Please, everyone, return home for now. I will personally visit each of you to apologize another day." With things having reached this point, the guests took their leave. Victoria stood at the main gate until a servant came to tell her that the old mistress wanted to see her. Only then did she return inside, her face a dark scowl. A small car, still a rarity in Summer City, was parked in front of the Winthrop mansion, drawing a crowd of onlookers. Roxana and Sincere got out of the car one after the other. As expected of a famous Summer City family, this mansion is much larger than the Halloways. Miss Shaw, please. Sincere led Roxana into the house and ordered tea and wine to be served. No need for wine, I prefer to be direct. Since Mr. Winthrop wishes to donate his family assets, I'd like to know how you plan to do it. Miss Shaw is indeed as straightforward as the rumors say. Roxana laughed heartily. In the rumors, I'm probably not a very nice person. The best thing they say about me is probably that I'm not like a woman, right? Sincere chuckled softly. As one of the most powerful people in the region, Roxana's reputation was indeed not the best. Rumor had it that she was arrogant and acted on a whim, often getting into shouting matches with her father, Marshall Shaw. Miss Shaw, I have 2 plans in mind, if you'd care to hear them. The weather was pleasant, and the two were talking in a pavilion in the middle of a lake. Roxana leaned against the railing, watching the fish in the water, and answered without turning her head. Go on. Sincere felt no annoyance at being ignored. Though I am a merchant, I know the importance of keeping one's word. Since I said I would donate half of the Winthrop family fortune, I will not go back on it. If Miss Shaw prefers a quick resolution, I can liquidate half of the assets and hand over the cash to you. However, it will take some time to raise the cash. Tell me the other method. It's what I mentioned in my letter. Use this half of the fortune as an investment. You and I will partner to open factories. I can provide the money, the formulas, and the workers. Oh? Roxana found this interesting. From the sound of it, you've already decided what kind of factory to open. Let me guess, a flour mill? A textile dyeing mill? A soap factory? At this, Roxana finally turned around, her expression serious. Tell me in detail what you're thinking. She was tall, with long legs clad in military trousers. Sincere, sitting in his chair, had to look up at her. There was a smile in his eyes, but he didn't elaborate on his plan as Roxana had requested. After a moment's thought, Roxana also smiled. You really are. If this is a partnership, it should be one of equals. Sincere's smile deepened. Miss Shaw, please have a seat. As they sat opposite each other, Sincere took out the business plan he carried with him. Miss Shaw, please take a look. Roxana took the plan. She read it with intense focus. Sincere wasn't in a hurry. He sipped his tea quietly and waited. After a good half hour, Roxana finally looked up. Tell me, how do we cooperate? You will invest half of the Winthrop fortune. I will cover the rest of the money, the labor, and the technical formulas. We will each hold a 50% share. How does that sound? Roxana looked at Sincere intently for a long time before uttering a single word. Deal. Roxana only stayed in Summer City for 2 days. After visiting the proposed site for the soap factory with Sincere in the western suburbs, she left. However, she gave her car to Sincere. Sincere initially tried to refuse, but Roxana waved her hand. I've never taken back something I've given away. Do you know why I'm giving this to you? Chapter 12, I do. It was simply to leave a symbol, to let everyone in Summer City know that Sincere Winthrop was under her protection. Sincere found her a bit hard to read. Half the Winthrop fortune was enough to build not just 1, but 3 or even 5 soap factories. His offer to cover the rest of the costs was an empty promise. He didn't believe Roxana couldn't see that. Yet she had still agreed to a 50-50 split of shares and profits. Since he couldn't understand it, Sincere decided not to dwell on it. As long as you know. Take care, Mr. Winthrop. Roxana sat astride her horse, her back straight, her smile bold and unrestrained. This young marshal will be waiting for you to make me a fortune. Take care, Miss Shaw. Sincere nodded, watching as Roxana and her entourage rode away. Sincere. Just as Sincere was about to turn and go back into his mansion, someone called him from behind. He turned to see Victoria emerge from a side alley. She looked haggard, with faint dark circles under her eyes. "What are you doing here?" Sincere frowned. "Is there a problem with the account books I prepared?" Victoria didn't answer him. She stared grimly in the direction Roxana had left, then at Sincere in his long gown, her expression sour. Has she been staying here these past 2 days? It was obvious who she was. Sincere thought this woman must be ill. He turned and walked into the Winthrop mansion, not wanting to deal with her foolishness. "Sincere, wait for me, I have something to talk to you about." Seeing Sincere enter the gates of his mansion, Victoria seemed to snap back to reality and rushed up the steps after him. "Hey, this is the Winthrop residence. If you want to see our young master, Miss Holloway, please present a calling card first." Sam stood in the doorway, his arms spread wide to block her path. "A calling card? Don't you know who I am?" Victoria found this laughable. She tried to get past Sam, but he was agile, blocking her at every turn, refusing to let her in. Seeing Sincere's figure continue on without even a pause, Victoria grew anxious and shoved Sam aside. "Get out of the way, Sincere Winthrop. If you don't want to cause a scene, you'll let me in." Sincere stopped. He turned and said wearily, "Sam, let her in." Leading Victoria into the garden, Sincere asked her, "Why were you so insistent on seeing me?" He rubbed his temples in annoyance, not understanding how Victoria had suddenly become so shameless. "Aren't you going to invite me inside to sit?" Once inside the Winthrop estate, Victoria assumed Sincere still had feelings for her. A smile touched her eyes, and a look of smugness appeared in her gaze. Who ever heard of receiving a guest outdoors, without even a chair? Sincere felt his hand twitch. He desperately wanted to slap Victoria's self-satisfied face. "We can talk here. I'm very busy. If you have something to say, Miss Holloway, please say it directly." Victoria was displeased, but remembering the purpose of her visit, she lowered her eyes and gave a slight cough to mask her feelings. "Sincere, I know I was wrong. I shouldn't have asked for a divorce as soon as I returned. Grandmother and the others have already punished me severely. I'm sorry." She took a step back and bowed deeply to Sincere. Sincere accepted it without moving. "Sincere, let's get back together," Victoria said, her voice choked with emotion. "The Holloway family, we really can't do without you." Sincere began to laugh. "Victoria Holloway, when you say that, you don't even dare to look me in the eye. Do you really think I'm a fool to be ordered around at your whim?" "Don't twist my words." Victoria's head snapped up, the anger in her eyes impossible to hide. She paced back and forth angrily before speaking again. "Sincere, I know you've admired me since we were young. I came back with Julian and said those terrible things to you, and you're angry. It's a normal reaction, I don't blame you. Weren't you just using the party to humiliate me? Fine, you've achieved your goal. Everyone in Summer City is laughing at me, at the Holloway family. Now that you've let off your steam, shouldn't you come back with me? The Holloway family and I, we can't do without you." Sincere looked at the woman before him in disbelief. After a moment, he laughed out loud. "Victoria Holloway, do you think I went to the trouble of publishing a divorce announcement just because I was jealous? That after making a scene, I would meekly come back to you as if nothing had happened? What else could it be?" Victoria frowned, looked around, and lowered her voice. "Are you going to say that you found a new backer in Roxana Shaw? Don't be naive, those grunts are the greediest, most barbaric people. Practically cannibals. The country is in turmoil, with chaos everywhere, and it's all because of these warlords relying on Roxana Shaw is like making a deal with the devil, so?" Sincere asked faintly. "If partnering with Roxana Shaw is playing with fire, what would remarrying you be? Paving the way for someone else?" Victoria was speechless, suppressing her anger. "How can you say that grandmother said that if you're willing to come back, you'll still be the Holloway son-in-law, and my parents won't hold what happened before against you? Victoria Holloway, when you were traveling by ship, did you happen to fall into the water?" "What do you mean?" Victoria didn't understand. "I think you've got water in your head." Victoria grabbed Sincere as he turned to leave. "I'll say it one more time, come back with me." She tried to drag Sincere away, heedless of all decorum. Chapter 13. After the party, the Halloway household was in chaos. Reginald, overcome with rage, was being treated with acupuncture all over his body. Eleanor lay in her room with a compress on her forehead, weeping about the family's misfortune. Dexter, with a missing tooth and a swollen face, joined his mother in cursing Sincere. The entire family was in an uproar. Victoria, overwhelmed with frustration, got into a fight with Julian. She accused him of insisting on the party, which had brought such shame upon the Halloway family. She also said that if he hadn't insisted on inviting every notable person in Summer City, the humiliation wouldn't have been so great. Julian had never been subjected to such blame. He retorted, questioning Victoria. Wasn't it clear she also wanted to use the party to boost her prestige and influence? Now that it had failed, why was she blaming him for everything? They had a huge fight, and Julian, furious, packed his bags and was about to storm out. Only then did Victoria panic. Sincere had already left the family. If Julian left too, she would be mocked for ending up with nothing. She threw her arms around Julian, crying that she was just so worried about her elders that she had spoken foolishly. She even slapped her own face. Only then was Julian satisfied. He warned her, "Who am I? I am the only son of the Secretary General of the military government. Remember, Victoria, you are to adore me and love me. I am never wrong to please the young master." Victoria humbled herself further, coaxing him and even agreeing to things she had previously refused. At last, Julian's anger subsided, but Victoria was left with a bitterness she couldn't express. Then Matilda forced her to go find Sincere, telling her she had to bring him back, no matter what. She hadn't wanted to go, but Matilda had shown her the family's account books. "Do you think the Halloway family has any money left? If we don't make up with Sincere, are we supposed to move out and live on the streets?" Only then did Victoria reluctantly go to find Sincere. Now, seeing that Sincere was unreceptive to all persuasion, she grew desperate and even tried to drag him away without any regard for her dignity. "You dare lay a hand on my young master?" Sam let out a cry and lunged forward, biting down on Victoria's hand. Victoria cried out in pain and raised her hand to scratch Sam's face. But before her hand could land, she felt something cold press against her forehead. Victoria turned her head stiffly and saw that Sincere was holding a pistol in his right hand. The dark muzzle was pointed at her head. Sincere's voice was chilling. "You touch Sam and see what happens." Victoria knew how deadly the weapon was. If he pulled the trigger, her head would be blown apart. Slowly, she let go, her eyes welling with tears. "Sincere, how did it come to this between us?" she said, 2 lines of tears slowly rolling down her face. If he hadn't already seen through her cold and selfish nature, Sincere might have been moved by her in that moment. He gestured with the pistol for Victoria to back away. "Whatever we had between us, it's over now. From now on, there will be no relationship between us. Leave my house immediately, or this gun might go off by accident." Victoria gave him a resentful look and, left with no choice, walked away. "Young master, what did you ever see in a person like that?" Sam asked, completely bewildered. His young master didn't seem like the type to be blinded by a pretty face. Sincere holstered the pistol Roxana had given him and looked up at the drifting white clouds, sighing softly. "It's natural for a young man to be drawn to a beautiful young woman, isn't it? I was never in good health as a child, and my father, afraid I would be bullied, didn't send me to a formal school. Growing up, the only girl I ever really knew was Victoria Halloway. Victoria was his age, beautiful and bold. Sincere felt that it was only natural for him to fall for her, but now it seemed he had truly been blind, failing to see that she was a carnivorous flower. Pack our things. We're going to the provincial capital." Putting Victoria out of his mind for the moment, Sincere instructed Sam. "What for?" "Before Roxana left, she gave me a business card. She said it was an old acquaintance of hers, also returned from studying abroad, who specialized in chemistry related to daily consumer products. I want to see if I can persuade this person to come and be the manager of the soap factory." Sam agreed and quickly went to pack their bags. At the Halloway residence, After learning that Victoria had failed to bring Sincere back, Matilda Halloway silently tapped her wooden fish, her prayer beads turning in her hand. Mother, Sincere has suddenly become so ruthless. Could he have found something out? Reginald asked in a low voice. Matilda's eyes snapped open, and a fierce, sharp light shot from her cloudy pupils. If that's the case, we have no choice but to— The string of her prayer beads broke, and the round beads scattered across the floor. Chapter 14. Reginald squinted, the downturned corners of his mouth giving his otherwise decent face a cruel cast. Victoria was bewildered. "Grandmother, father, what are you talking about?" After exchanging a look, Matilda said gravely, "There are some things Victoria should know." "Mother, she's still young," Reginald hesitated. "Let her know so she's aware. It will prevent her from being caught off guard by other schemes." Matilda beckoned Victoria closer and spoke in a heavy tone. "Victoria, do you know how Arthur Winthrop and his family died?" Arthur Winthrop? It took Victoria a moment to remember that Sincere's father was named Arthur. "I heard that bandits broke into the city and robbed them. The entire Winthrop family was murdered." She remembered hearing that the smell of blood from the Winthrop mansion that night had filled half the city. Sincere, who had been in a clinic due to illness, had narrowly escaped with his life, but the sudden loss of his entire family had been a devastating blow, and he had been bedridden for months before slowly recovering. Victoria remembered that during that time her grandmother had often visited the Winthrop home to comfort and care for Sincere. It was because of this that Sincere had an especially deep bond with her grandmother. To bring up this old matter now, could there be another reason for Sincere's father's death? Victoria looked at her grandmother, who was chanting with her eyes closed amidst the incense smoke, and her father, who was looking down without a word. Suddenly a cold sweat broke out all over her body. Grandmother, father. Victoria struggled to speak. Could it be that back then, seeing the cold sweat on her forehead, Reginald frowned and barked, "If you want to be superior to others, you must have a hard heart and a ruthless hand. Look at you now, what a disgrace, you're nothing like a Halloway with a crash." Victoria fell backward and fainted. Matilda had Reginald help her up. A deep frown creased her forehead, making her wrinkled face look almost ferocious. "Find an opportunity for Silas Two Fingers Kane to see me." She stroked Victoria's cold face, her old eyes filled with venom. "Victoria has a kind heart, she wouldn't be able to do it." Reginald nodded. Mother and son whispered to each other for a long time. No one knew that huddled beneath the altar was a slender, frail figure who had heard every single word. Sincere and Sam arrived in the provincial capital. It wasn't Sincere's first time here, but it was Sam's. "Young master, this place is huge," Sam exclaimed in amazement as they carried their suitcases out of the train station. Sincere, too, felt a sense of wonder. It had been years since he'd been here, and the city had changed so much. Compared to this place, Summer City was indeed old-fashioned and conservative. Following the address on the card Roxana had given him, Sincere found himself in front of a house with the distinctive architecture of the capital. "Excuse me, is this the residence of Miss Helen Richardson?" A woman of about 30 came to the door. "You must be Mr. Sincere Winthrop." The woman gestured for him to enter, welcomed him in, and personally served him a cup of coffee. "Roxana already called me." Sincere was surprised. He had assumed Helen Richardson would be a middle-aged man. He never expected the elegant young woman before him, dressed in a simple but tasteful light purple satin dress, to be her. "Miss Richardson, hello. I am Sincere Winthrop." After introducing himself, Sincere explained the purpose of his visit. "Miss Shaw and I intend to partner to open a soap factory. However, we are both amateurs in this field. She has the connections, and I have the money. We don't have the technical expertise. I heard that you studied this very subject abroad. I was wondering if I could persuade you to come out of retirement?" Helen Richardson didn't mince words. "I'd like to see your business plan." Sincere opened his suitcase and handed her the plan. After a quick read, Helen smiled faintly. "This plan is quite detailed. However, if you'll permit me to be blunt, the sections on factory construction and daily production and sales are clearly written by a layman. I'm eager to hear your thoughts." Helen smiled. "If we were to go into detail, I'm afraid it would take until this evening. You must be tired from your journey, Mr. Winthrop. Please, go and freshen up. We can talk in detail after lunch, shall we?" It seemed Helen had already made arrangements. Sincere readily agreed. He was led to a guest room by a servant where he washed up. After lunch, as the weather was fine, Helen invited Sincere out onto the lawn. Under the sun, they talked for a long time about opening the soap factory. Sincere listened intently, nodding or shaking his head from time to time. After an afternoon of conversation, Sincere finally understood why Roxana had sent him to find Helen Richardson. She was truly a woman of real talent and ambition. Also, having returned from abroad, she was different from the boy-crazy Victoria. Helen had genuine ideals and aspirations. She sincerely wanted to achieve something in her home country, to do something for the nation and its people. "Miss Richardson, talking with you has been incredibly enlightening. Compared to you, I feel like I've been living under a rock. I wonder if I might have the honor of becoming your partner. Sincere, I greatly admire your courage. It's a pleasure to work with you." They both stood up and shook hands. They agreed that Sincere would return to Summer City first, and Helen would arrive in a week. Upon returning to Summer City and getting off the train, Sincere and Sam were met by his car. However, when he arrived at the Winthrop mansion, Sincere was once again left speechless. This time, the person waiting at his front gate was none other than Matilda Halloway, Chapter 15. Sincere seeing Sincere from her rickshaw, Matilda Halloway's old eyes lit up. She got out of the rickshaw, leaning unsteadily on her maid's arm. Sincere put on a smile, but inwardly he was cursing. This old woman deliberately waiting for him at his gate under the hot sun for all to see. Grandmother. Suppressing his anger, Sincere went over with a smile and supported Matilda. "The weather is getting hot. Why did you come all this way? I was worried, so I came to see you." Seeing Sam carrying a large suitcase behind him, Matilda lowered her eyelids, her voice tinged with sadness. She stroked Sincere's hand. "I heard you went to the provincial capital? Ah, it's all Victoria's fault. If it weren't for her, you wouldn't be so heartbroken." She assumed Sincere had gone to the capital to mend his broken heart after the divorce. Seeing that Sincere didn't explain, Matilda took it as confirmation. Refusing Sincere's invitation to talk inside, Matilda stood at the gate of the Winthrop mansion, tears streaming down her face. "My dear boy, I know about the foolish things Victoria has done. She may be foolish, but I am not in my heart. I only recognize you as my grandson-in-law. I brought out the family discipline and gave Victoria a good thrashing. She can't even get out of bed now, Sincere. You are a kind and understanding boy. They say marriage is a bond forged over lifetimes. Even if it's just for my sake, please, give Victoria another chance, won't you?" She was old, but her voice was not soft. An old woman with white hair and a tear-streaked face, begging her divorced grandson-in-law to come back. It was a sight that would move anyone. Sure enough, neighbors and passers-by began to point and stare at the Winthrop mansion. The Halloway family does have some sensible people, isn't that the truth? As the saying goes, an elder in the family is a treasure. With such a wise old woman around, things can't be all that bad. I say, young Master Winthrop should show the old lady some respect. Agreed. The other Halloways are one thing, but this old woman has always been genuinely good to young Master Winthrop. If he dismisses even her, then he truly is ungrateful. More and more unpleasant comments were made. A glint appeared in Matilda's eyes, but she turned and shouted at the speakers. "All of you be quiet, this is our family's business. What does it have to do with you?" "No good deed goes unpunished," someone spat and walked away. Matilda patted Sincere's hand. "My boy, think about it. Grandmother won't force you. Come back when you've thought it through." With that, she unsteadily got back into the rickshaw, back to the Halloway residence, leaving Sincere standing alone. "Young master, what does she mean by that?" Sam was furious. Sincere's lips curved into a sneer. "What does she mean? Isn't it obvious?" She was trying to use this show of weakness to force his hand. In her dreams inside the mansion, Sincere called for the butler and asked how long Matilda had been waiting at the gate. The butler was annoyed. "She's been waiting at the gate every day since you left for the capital, young master. She always comes when there are a lot of people around. Young master, we have to do something." The young master was the first person in Summer City to get a divorce, and there had been a lot of gossip these past few days. With Matilda making a scene like this, the young master's reputation would only get worse, I understand. Before he could say more, Sam led someone in. Sincere looked up and saw it was Maggie, the young maid who served Matilda. "What are you doing here?" Maggie looked at the butler, who tactfully withdrew. "Young master, you must not go back to the Holloway residence." Sincere narrowed his eyes. "What do you mean?" Maggie wiped her tears and recounted what she had overheard. She was young, but her memory was excellent. As she spoke, she even mimicked Matilda's tone and expression perfectly. The old mistress also said. Said what? A storm surged in Sincere's heart. He gripped the arms of his chair so tightly his knuckles turned white. The old mistress also said, "If she had known you had such a rebellious streak, she wouldn't have drugged you back then, and would have let you stay in the old mansion." Sincere shot to his feet. A sweet taste filled his throat, and he suddenly coughed up a mouthful of blood. "Young master, I'm fine." Sincere wiped the blood from his lips with the back of his hand and bit down hard. His body trembled slightly, his face ashen. The abduction and murder of his parents and brother had always been a thorn in his side. He had reported it to the police, and the police department had investigated tirelessly, but they had never found any leads. Sincere had suspected many people, but never the Holloways. For one, the two families had been friends for generations and were related by marriage. The Holloways relied on the Winthrops. There was no reason for them to commit such a crime. Secondly, Matilda Holloway had been truly good to him, wholeheartedly so. In his darkest moments of grief, it was this kind old woman who had stayed by his side and comforted him. But now, it seemed it was all a lie. Sincere closed his eyes. When he opened them again, the boundless hatred was gone, replaced by a chilling calm. He looked at Maggie. "Tell me what you heard again, carefully. Don't leave out a single word." As evening fell in the dim light, Sincere's pale face looked almost ghostly. Maggie swallowed hard and repeated what she had said. Sam, with tears in his eyes, looked at Sincere worriedly. "Young master." Sincere raised a hand, signaling that he was all right. He replayed Maggie's words in his mind and keenly caught a name. Chapter 16. Silas Two Fingers Kane. "Sam, go to the Holloways tomorrow and tell them to move out of the Winthrop property immediately. Then have someone watch them. If any strangers make contact with them, report to me at once." Sincere gave his orders. Then remembered that the Summer City police had investigated for a long time without finding any trace of this Kane. The Holloways must have bribed the police long ago. He thought for a moment and quickly wrote a letter. Have this telegraphed to Miss Shaw. To be capable of such a vicious crime as kidnapping and murder, Kane must be a known figure in the underworld. Asking Roxana for help should be much more effective. As for the favor he would owe, Sincere wasn't worried. He would simply pay her. After making the arrangements, Sincere called the butler back. "Send Maggie to the countryside." "Young master, I should go back to the Holloways," Maggie volunteered. "If they say anything else, I can overhear it." "No, you can't go back." Sincere refused flatly. He told the butler, "Send her away now. Arrange for 2 trustworthy men to protect her well." Even if Maggie was brave, Sincere wouldn't let her take that risk again. Besides, in a flash of inspiration, Sincere had already made a decision. He would first make the Holloways fall into disarray themselves. Suddenly being evicted and then having a maid disappear, especially a maid who served Matilda directly, would surely throw the Holloways into a panic. And when people panicked, they made mistakes. Maggie bowed to Sincere. "Young master, you saved my life. I will do whatever you say. Whenever you need me, I will be waiting for your command." She then left with the butler. Sincere was left alone in the vast hall. He didn't light any lamps. Thinking of his murdered parents and brother, Sincere's heart felt like it was being twisted by a knife. That year he had eaten something that disagreed with him and had been sick for days, forcing him to stay in a clinic to recover. But what had he eaten? Sincere couldn't remember, but he remembered clearly that during that time, Matilda, Eleanor, and even Dexter had brought him food. A horrifying thought struck him. From that time, or perhaps even earlier, after he and Victoria were engaged, or even before, the Halloways had been planning this move. His body began to tremble uncontrollably. Sincere couldn't tell if he was shocked, scared, or furious. The Halloways, he covered his face. Sobs seeped through his fingers. At first, they were quiet whimpers. Gradually, the sobs grew louder. Sincere tried desperately to suppress them, but he couldn't. He slid from his chair to the floor, curling into a ball. He wept uncontrollably. If he hadn't admired Victoria, giving the Halloways an opportunity to scheme, perhaps his father, mother, and brother would never have met such a fate. He cried until he couldn't breathe. Young Master Sam came in from outside, turned on the light, and was shocked to see Sincere on the floor, convulsing with sobs. He rushed over and held him. "Oh, my young master," he cried, tears streaming down his face. After a long while, Sincere finally caught his breath. He pulled himself up using a chair, his swollen red eyes filled with a new determination.
"Sam, a life for a life, that's fair, isn't it?"
"Yes, it's the law of heaven and earth. Then, since my parents and brother died so horribly, whatever methods I used to take my revenge are justified, aren't they? Young master, whatever you do, Sam will support you for the first time." Sincere's handsome face was filled with a murderous rage. The next day, Sincere had the telephone company install a phone for easier communication. On the third day, Matilda, having been driven from the Winthrop mansion, came once again to the front gate. Sincere, dressed in plain white morning clothes, appeared before her. "Sincere, you're old Mrs. Holloway." Sincere had lost some weight, and his voice lacked its usual clear, gentle tone, now laced with a chilling coldness. "Have you forgotten? Today is the anniversary of my parents' and brother's death." For no reason, Matilda felt an icy wind blow across her neck. The gloomy sky, Sincere in his mourning clothes, and the faint sound of funeral music, whether real or imagined. Matilda let out a scream and, without even waiting for her maid, scrambled into the rickshaw. "Go quickly, go." Sincere's gaze was cold as he watched Matilda flee in terror. Scared already? It seemed the past 2 days had been very unsettling for the old woman with the Buddha's words and the serpent's heart. Sincere smiled, his eyes narrowing. Just as he was about to turn and go back inside, the sound of hoofbeats in the distance made him pause. He looked toward the sound and saw a single rider on a horse galloping toward him from the end of the street. Sincere's eyes widened. Chapter 17. It was Roxana Shaw, dressed in a charcoal gray military uniform, arriving at the Winthrop mansion gate. Roxana reined in her horse with a sharp whoa and it reared up. She leaped down and, seeing Sincere in his mourning clothes, was taken aback for a moment before tossing her riding crop to the butler at the door. "I'm here." For some reason, hearing those words, Sincere felt his eyes grow hot, as if tears were about to fall. He fought back the stinging sensation in his nose. "I didn't know you were coming." "Miss Shaw, please come in." "I'll go offer a stick of incense." Sincere was silent for a moment, then nodded. "Please, follow me." Standing before the memorial tablets of Sincere's parents and brother, Roxana shed her usual roguish demeanor and solemnly bowed and offered incense. Then they returned to the drawing room to talk. This Silas Two Fingers Kane is a known figure in the underworld. His territory isn't in Summer City, it's in the northern 6 provinces. Sincere's brow furrowed.
The northern 6 provinces, yes.
Normally people like him have their own territory where they operate. It's rare for them to cause trouble in someone else's turf. "I understand," Sincere nodded. But Kane just happened to pull a major job in Summer City. A bitter taste filled his mouth. Roxana hesitated, then couldn't resist leaning forward and using her slender, slightly calloused fingers to lift the corners of Sincere's mouth. Don't always look so miserable. I'm sure your parents and brother wouldn't want to see you suffer like this. The tear Sincere had been holding back for so long finally fell. Don't worry. I'll have my men continue to track Kane. Once we catch him, I'll deliver him to you personally. Even if you want to cut him into 1,000 pieces, I'll hand you the knife myself. How does that sound? Thank you, Miss Shaw. Sincere wiped his tears. For the first time, he felt that his revenge might not be so difficult after all. Regardless of Kane, I will not spare the Halloway family. Roxana didn't know the full extent of the Halloways' involvement, but she was smart. After a moment's thought, it wasn't hard for her to connect the dots. Such cunning, the Halloways are truly something else, Roxana tutted. It wasn't just murder, it was psychological torment. What do you plan to do? She asked, her eyes narrowing with anticipation. Sincere gritted his teeth. I will repay the hatred and humiliation doubly. Roxana gave him a thumbs up, spoken like the Sincere Winthrop I know. The Sincere Winthrop, who had managed a vast fortune before he was even 20. They discussed the details of the soap factory construction for a while longer. Hearing that Helen Richardson would arrive in 3 or 4 days, Roxana left Summer City, in the small Halloway residence. After fleeing back home, Matilda had developed a fever and started talking nonsense. Reginald had called for a doctor. The doctor gave a long-winded diagnosis, mostly standard talk about catching a cold. Despite drinking the medicine, by evening her condition had not improved, it had worsened. What on earth is going on? Reginald scratched his head. She was fine when she left this morning. He asked the maid who had accompanied Matilda, was she upset by that ingrate at the Winthrop residence? The maid shook her head repeatedly. The old mistress barely exchanged 2 words with the young master-in-law. What young master-in-law? Eleanor snapped. Victoria had been feeling unwell for the past few days. Her face was pale as she asked the maid, "Then why is grandmother like this?" The old mistress was just startled to see the young master, Mr. Winthrop, dressed entirely in mourning clothes. The Halloways exchanged glances. Only then did they remember that today was the anniversary of the Winthrop family's death. Reginald, already guilty, felt a wave of unease. Each with their own dark thoughts, they left the small chapel. Victoria was intercepted by Julian halfway back to her room. "Victoria, what's been wrong with you these past few days?" Julian was very displeased. "I've noticed that ever since Sincere left, you've been like a lost soul. What is it, can't let go of old feelings?" Ever since learning about the Winthrop family massacre and her grandmother and father's involvement, Victoria had been on edge and had naturally neglected Julian. "Julian, I haven't been feeling well these past few days. Can you please not be so unreasonable?" Victoria had no energy to deal with Julian right now. Julian studied her closely and saw that her complexion was indeed not normal. "I knew it, you wouldn't be pining for Sincere Winthrop." He breathed a sigh of relief and pulled Victoria into his temporary room. It was much smaller and more cramped than the bamboo whisper pavilion. "Julian, let's get married." After sitting in a daze for a while, Victoria, nestled in Julian's arms, suddenly spoke. "What did you say?" Julian was surprised. "Isn't it a bit too soon?" Victoria clutched her lower abdomen, a rare blush on her cheeks. "This can't wait." Julian was ecstatic. "You're pregnant?" "Yes, it's been 2 months." "Julian, let's get married. Let's go to the provincial capital and have a grand wedding. I want everyone in the capital to know how much I love you." Seeing Julian hesitate, Victoria bit her lip, a mist forming in her eyes. "What, you don't want to marry me?" Julian snapped back to reality and forced a smile. "How could that be?" "I'm just so happy." The next afternoon, Sincere heard that Victoria had hastily left with Julian. "She runs fast," Sincere sneered. "Let her think she can escape. For now." Chapter 18. Helen Richardson arrived. Sincere put his thoughts aside for the moment and took Helen to the site selected for the soap factory. After studying the blueprints for a long time and measuring the site, Helen had a preliminary idea. Sincere had originally planned for her to stay at the Winthrop mansion, but thinking of the revenge he was about to unleash on the Halloways, he instead arranged for her to stay in a small villa that had been part of his mother's dowry. Helen, being paid a handsome salary by Sincere, didn't mind. She was filled with excitement about building the factory and was soon busy from dawn till dusk. With that matter entirely in Helen's hands, Sincere found himself with time on his hands. Among the Halloway servants were a few he had hired himself. These maids had either been abducted or sold by their families. If it weren't for Sincere, they might have been sold into brothels. So, while they didn't show it openly, they were secretly grateful to him. Besides Maggie, there was another maid who served Matilda named Pearl. Sam went to see Pearl once and gave her a set of instructions. A few days later, word spread from the Halloway household that the old mistress had gone mad. If Sincere were still in charge, such news would never have left the house. But after he left, Eleanor had taken over. She was greedy and shallow, completely unfit to manage a household. The entire Halloway family was now as leaky as a sieve. Whatever happened, the news would spread throughout Summer City within a couple of hours. Stories of Matilda shouting she was cold while tearing off all her clothes. Stories of Reginald, troubled by family matters, frequenting brothels and refusing to go home. Stories of Dexter chasing after a rich young lady all over town. In just half a month, the Halloways had become a laughingstock. Sincere waited quietly. He waited for the evidence to arrive, to deliver a fatal blow to the Halloways. But what arrived sooner was a trussed-up Silas Two Fingers Kane with a gag in his mouth. Roxana threw the man at Sincere's feet and said with a smile, "This one was hard to catch. Took a lot of effort." The enemy was right before him. The fire of hatred burned in Sincere's eyes. His body began to tremble. "I knew you'd be like this." Roxana pulled a stack of papers from her pocket. "This is his confession." Sincere's eyes widened in fury as he read. "You say that after you robbed my family's fortune, you were originally going to spare their lives?" Sincere pulled the gag from Kane's mouth and stared at his bruised and swollen face. "You didn't kill them?" Cough. Kane had barely gotten the word "I" out when Roxana kicked him from behind. Kane looked back at her angrily, grumbled something, and started again. "There are rules in the underworld. I was after money. Why would I take lives for no reason? If you didn't plan to kill them, how did my parents and brother die?" Sincere still remembered how gruesome their deaths had been. If it wasn't the work of an underworld figure like Kane, he couldn't imagine how cruel the Halloways must have been. Of course it was. Kane clammed up again. "Still trying to be loyal at a time like this?" Roxana drew her riding crop. Kane sighed in resignation. "It wasn't my idea to hit the Winthrop family in Summer City in the first place. Years ago I was ambushed, and it was Reginald Halloway who saved my life. I owed him a favor. He came to me that time, said your family had set him up and nearly wiped out his fortune, and asked me to teach you a lesson. I thought he just wanted to scare your family a little. Who would have thought that at the very end your brother would see him?" Roxana looked at Sincere worriedly. Seeing him swaying, she reached out to steady him. Sincere's eyes were almost completely red with blood. "Because of that, he killed his whole family." Roxana patted his shoulder at the right moment, pulling him back from his grief. She said in a low voice, "The murder, it was part of his plan from the beginning." Sincere closed his eyes and 2 lines of tears streamed down his cheeks. "Yes, the Halloways had it planned long ago. When I proposed to Victoria, they started their scheme. Kane was just one piece of that scheme." Roxana asked him, "This man, what do you want to do with him? Send him to the police department?" Chapter 19. Sincere calmed himself. "Keep him. After I've dealt with the Halloways, then we'll send him to the police." A massive fire suddenly broke out at the Halloway residence in Summer City. Fanned by the wind, the flames consumed the small estate, burning it to the ground. Strangely, while the masters of the house were burned to charred remains, all the servants escaped unharmed. Sincere stood on the top floor of the Winthrop mansion, watching the flames light up the distant sky, saying nothing. Tisk tisk, I thought you'd do something like bury them alive or have them torn apart by 5 horses. Miss Shaw, I wanted revenge. I thought of 1,000 ways to torture them, Sincere said with a bitter smile. But in the end, I found I couldn't bring myself to do it. He turned and looked at Roxana intently. If I said this fire had nothing to do with me, would you believe me? Roxana coughed and looked toward the Holloway residence. After a long moment, she said softly, "The winds of change are blowing in the military government too." Sincere's eyes snapped up to look at her profile. Suddenly, he smiled.
"Does that mean I boarded a pirate ship?"
Too late for regrets now. The next morning, Roxana had Kane sent to the police department. The years-old kidnapping case that had terrorized Summer City was finally solved. The culprits, it turned out, were the Holloways. They had coveted the Winthrops' immense wealth and wanted it for themselves. A marriage alliance, a murder, a scheme to swallow a family's entire fortune. It was a seamless plot. If not for Sincere's quick thinking, he would likely have been long dead. As everyone lamented the depths of human wickedness, some inevitably connected the Holloway fire to Sincere. But the police questioned him once and found no evidence. Besides, Sincere had money and powerful connections, so the matter was quietly dropped. When Victoria, who was in the provincial capital preparing for her wedding with Julian, heard the news, she wept until she fainted. When she woke up, Julian wanted to break up with her. "My family is timid. We wouldn't dare to be associated with someone like you. What if one day you turn ruthless? I could end up dead in a ditch, unwilling to accept this." Victoria got into a physical fight with Julian. In the scuffle, Julian's foot struck her lower abdomen. Victoria had a miscarriage, perhaps feeling some lingering affection for her. Julian rushed Victoria to the hospital, but the first thing Victoria did when she woke up was to plunge a dagger into Julian's chest. Julian Montgomery was dead. Marcus Montgomery, heartbroken over the loss of his son, had Victoria thrown in prison. Before she could even stand trial, Victoria died in her cell. The official story was suicide, but according to the medical examiner, that was utter nonsense. What kind of suicide victim is found naked, their body covered in bruises from a brutal assault? Sincere poured all his energy into the soap factory. Once built, the factory quickly went into production. With the formula provided by Sincere and the techniques Helen had learned abroad, the first batch of Aura soap was an instant hit, sought after by countless people. The factory recouped its initial investment in the first year. By the second year, the profits were rolling in, astonishingly high. Roxana and Sincere kept in touch by letter, but she was never able to return to Summer City. Marshal Shaw had purged some of the old grumbling figures around him, and in the process had weakened his own position, forcing him to hand over power to his daughter. Other warlords, seeing Roxana as young and female, started wars, hoping to gobble up the Shaw family's territory. But after Roxana annihilated a few of them, things quieted down. Unlike other warlords, Roxana placed great importance on the well-being of the people. She encouraged production and commerce. She banned opium in the army, and with her wealth, her troops had the best equipment. This was also thanks to Sincere. After the success of the soap factory, he and Helen went on to open a textile mill. Later, they added a cannery, a dye works, a candle factory, and more. Sincere accumulated a fortune he had never imagined. At the age of 30, for the sake of his business, Sincere decided to study abroad. Roxana personally saw him off at the docks. "Will you come back?" Now in her prime, she was as radiant as ever, but also more composed. If before she was like a sharp sword, now she had matured, like a great sword that no longer needed a sharp edge to be formidable. Her free spirit remained, but it was no longer off-putting. "Of course I will. My business is here." Sincere reached out a hand. Looking into her star-filled eyes, he said softly, "My roots are here too." The man before her, dressed in a simple gown with a single, elegant bamboo stalk embroidered on the shoulder. Roxana stared at him for a long time, then smiled. "I'll be waiting for you." Chapter 20. 3 years later, Sincere returned, his studies complete. He stood on the dock with his suitcase, looking around. The ship's passengers had all disembarked, but Roxana, who had promised to meet him, was nowhere in sight. The sun was setting, casting a golden sheen across the vast expanse of water, a beautiful yet indescribably cold sight. Just like Sincere's heart at that moment. Roxana. Why hadn't she come? Was she held up by something, or was there another reason? After looking into the distance for a long time, Sincere picked up his suitcase. Sincere, someone called his name. Sincere looked toward the voice, a smile instantly spreading across his face as he walked toward the person. They shared a hug. Helen, thank you for coming to get me. Sincere couldn't help but look behind Helen. Don't look. Helen put Sincere's suitcase in the car and started the engine. She's injured. She couldn't come. Injured? How is she? Sincere's heart leaped into his throat. From the day he had first proposed their partnership until now, nearly a decade had passed. Over their long association, a deep bond had formed between him and Roxana. To him, Roxana was a kind of salvation. She was the morning star in a long dark night, bright enough to guide his life. He had already decided that the first thing he would do upon his return was to confess his love for her. He never expected her to be injured. Helen drove, her eyes on the road ahead. She said casually, "She's alive, don't worry. She asked me to pick you up. I'll take you home first. How were your studies?" "Very fruitful," Sincere answered distractedly. After a pause, he said to Helen, "Helen, please take me to see Roxana." "You too?" Helen smiled and drove Sincere to the marshal's mansion. Inside, Roxana was sitting on her bed. She was looking down at a document when she suddenly heard a knock on the door. "Didn't I say not to disturb me?" Get out. The knocking outside stopped for a moment, then the door opened. "Didn't I say?" Roxana's voice trailed off. Standing in the doorway was Sincere. 3 years apart, yet he looked unchanged, still so handsome, so refined, still as gentle and warm as jade. Roxana stared, stunned. "What, you want me to get out?" "No, didn't I tell Helen to take you home first?" She fumbled to get out of bed, but the movement pulled at her wound, and she let out a stifled grunt. "Stay put, Marshal." Sincere gently pushed her back onto the bed, took off his overcoat, revealing a well-tailored suit underneath. He sat on the edge of the bed and casually picked up an apple and began to peel it. "Tell me how you got hurt." At the mention of this, Roxana sounded quite aggrieved. "I was assassinated." She took the apple from Sincere and took a bite. "I've been careless these past few years. I didn't expect there were still some old troublemakers I hadn't cleaned up properly." Sincere nodded. "Be more careful in the future." The room fell silent for a moment, with only the sound of Roxana crunching on her apple. "What are your plans now that you're back?" Roxana was just making small talk. "I studied management. I have to say, my old way of doing business was entirely based on handed-down experience. Even starting the factories, I just pulled you in on a whim. Now that I'm back, I plan to restructure my businesses." "That's it?" Roxana stared at Sincere. Seeing that he was finished, she couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. "Also, I've discovered that I've fallen in love with someone." As soon as the words were out, Roxana froze. Sincere let out a breath, his heart suddenly feeling light. So, speaking his love directly wasn't so difficult after all. "Who did you fall in love with? A local or a foreigner?" Roxana threw off her blankets and was about to get out of bed, cursing under her breath. "I've been waiting for 10 years and haven't dared to say a thing. Who is it?" "Who did you fall in love with?" Her shoulder wound burst open, and blood seeped through the bandage, bright red like a star in the dark night. "Your wound is opened." Sincere held down the fuming Roxana, his hand pausing over the patch of red. His eyes were shining as he stared at her. Under his burning gaze, Roxana, the formidable marshal who commanded the 6 provinces, slowly began to blush. "The person I've fallen in love with is named Shaw." He spoke each syllable slowly. As the words fell, Sincere gently pulled the injured Roxana into his arms. The two of them together at last. just like the 10 years they had walked side by side,